30 now. And I feel like we can jump in here, and people are going to start trickling in as they do. So welcome to the third webinar in the Technology Services webinar series. If you missed the first two, these webinars are all being recorded, so you can catch up with them after the fact. My name is Andrew Nierenhausen, and I work in Technology Services here at YRL. And I'm joined today by Laura from Library and Development Services at YRL as well. So today, we're going to talk about a few add-ons for your library website, some of which you might have heard about or you might already be using. The first add-on that we're going to look at is Library Help, which is a chat reference function for your website that allows you to take patron questions in real time and have conversations. And the second add-on is Wufoo, which is a forms service that allows you to create surveys, registration forms, voting pages, and any other information gathering that you want to do. So these are services that YRL licenses, but that you can access at your library for no cost. And unlike the other webinars in this series so far, the topics that we cover today are not totally present in the website training course that I've talked about previously, but we're going to use some of the skills from those videos as well, especially when it comes to embedding stuff on your web pages. So remember that you can find those website training videos on the YRL intranet or on yrl.ab.ca under the training tab. If you have any questions as we go along, feel free to post those in the chat, but I'm going to wait until the end to answer them. So I'm going to cut my video here and we'll get into it. So starting with Library Help, what is Library Help? So Library Help is a chat reference service which lets you send instant messages back and forth with your users. You've probably seen a service like this on some library websites before, but I feel like they're starting to pop up on a lot of websites, retail, government, really anything. You might see these little text pop-up boxes on websites that say, chat with us now. And so this is essentially what that is. So to get started with Library Help, the first thing that you're going to want to do is to send us an email at wsfl@yrl.ab.ca, and we can set up the chat function for your site. Generally, what we do to start is create a page that's not public, so you can have a chance to get in there, test things out, poke around before it's live to the public. And then once you've had a chance to play with things, we can publish it and go live for your patrons. There's also a lot of really great documentation that's been created around training and best practices for Library Help. So this is on the YRL intranet. Under our website tab, we have a Library Help section. And you can see we have some best practices and training documents here, but we also link to the Library Help documentation page. And here they have a lot of really great concise training videos covering like really every part of their service. And if you are using this service and you want to get the most out of it, I would recommend checking out a lot of the training that they have here. So you can get through to this from the YRL intranet, but the URL is up here as well, docs.libraryhelp.com, and just remembering that the E in Library Help is a 3. We don't have time today to go through all of the parts of the Library Help training in depth. So you can come here if you have some questions, or if you have some unanswered questions, you can contact us at YRL and we can help you figure that out as well. So I wanted to take a bit of time to show you what library help looks like, kind of both from the patron side and from the staff side. So I'm going to walk through a few basic steps here, kind of what a conversation looks like, but also bear with me as I have a bunch of browser windows open and I'm going to be moving around from place to place. So I'll try not to make it too confusing. So we'll start here. I set this up on the YRL site because I didn't want to, start setting this up on member library sites. And you can see I've had some demo conversations with myself here briefly. But this is what the patron sees generally. You have a chat page on your site. And the patron section is pretty simple. If the chat is active, there's going to be a green light up here. And this is going to be, it's grayed out now, but it'd be kind of a clearer white. And when it's chat is offline, you'll get this notice that chat is offline and the option to send an email. And this email is directed to the address on file for your library help account. So chat or patrons can chat in the chat box down here. And the options that they kind of have here are they can add attachments. So if they need to send a document or something, or they can email the chat transcription after you've completed the interaction. I feel like this isn't super common, but maybe if you give some really detailed instructions on how to do something in a reference question and the patron wants to hang on to that information, they could email that to themselves. They might not be aware that this function is there, so that might be something that you want to let them know. And then there's an option here to make this full screen. And this is pretty much the patron side. There's not a ton going on here. And we'll come back to this in a minute when we go live with it. So yeah, for the patron side, they mostly just need to show up and ask questions. So we'll head over here. This is the staff side. So you're going to log in at the web client. And when we get this set up on your website, if you're interested in using this, we'll send you all of the relevant URLs and logins and get that stuff all set up for you as well. So when you log in, you're going to get a few options about going live. The main one here is about receiving chats. So you can log in and choose not to receive chats, but most of the time you're probably going to want to receive chats here. You also have an option for auto logout. So if you don't want to use that, you can turn it off. If you have set chat time, say you're only going to be on until 2 p.m. or whenever your chat hours are set to, you can do that so it'll automatically log you out. And that way you're not accidentally leaving your chat on overnight and having people message you and you not respond. So that's just a little tool there. And you can also change your status here. There's a few different status options, but we're just going to kind of log in with these standard settings. Excuse me as I have a drink of water. So once you are logged into the staff client, you're going to be in this chats tab here. And this is where new chats are going to show up for you in this big empty space here. And if you receive more than one chat at a time, they're going to kind of split up. And I'll show you an example of this in just a minute as chats come in. But first, I want to just take a quick look at the settings and preferences menu here. There's a few things in here that you might want to look at. So the first thing that is here is the sound notifications. So if you are on a computer with speakers, you'd want to set up sound notifications for when chat comes in case you're just away from the computer or you're helping a patron or something like that. You want to just get a ding that lets you know that a chat has come in, so you are aware of that. And so you can change the sounds in here and test the volume and things like that. There's also an option for a visual notification. Maybe you're on a computer where you don't have speakers. If you set this up, when a chat comes in, you'll get a little pop-up box, kind of like when your computer asks you to do an update or something. You get a little text box down here, and it'll just tell you that there's a new chat. And here you can set how many open chats you have at a time. So if you could set this to have 6 chats come in, and here is the number after which you are changed to a status of busy, which I'm not actually sure if that prevents new chats from coming in or if that just changes your status here to say busy. And even though this says 6 open chats, it's really unlikely that you're going to get that many people contacting you at a time. Maybe you're going to see 2, but it's not so frequent from what I've seen that you're going to have. You're not going to be bombarded by chats throughout the day. And then there's just a few other settings here about your chat window, and I think a lot of these are just kind of preference things. So let's head back over to the chats window here. And I'm going to refresh this page, which now shows us that we're live. We get that green icon there. These are holdovers from a previous test that I've done. You can clear the chat history here, but you can continue chat histories even if the patron closes the window and comes back. You can kind of continue the same conversation. I'm just going to say hello here from the patron. I don't know if you heard that sound come through. And I've got a second browser over here. And so I'm just going to say hello back. And we'll say hello on the second browser. Again, I apologize for jumping around between different browsers. And we'll reply here. So you can see when you have 2 chats come in, how they split up here. And again, you can limit the number of chats that you have displaying on the screen at any time. So let's look at some of the functions that are in here on the staff side. There's not a ton. It's pretty similar to what's on the patron side. So in here we have insert emojis, transfer chat to a queue or user. This one you're probably not going to use very often. You're probably going to be running with 1 queue and maybe 1 or 2 users at a time. But if you did need to transfer a chat to another user, you can do that here. Send a file, so this is just attachments, snapshots, screencasts. So this is sharing media. You can copy the transcript, you can email the transcript, you can tag the chat, which is kind of an interesting function. And what that does is it'll send you an email to your email on file to kind of follow up with the chat. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later. And we also have the option to block the guest for 24 hours. And what this is an IP ban. So anyone using computers at that IP address, generally in one location, won't be able to contact you through the chat for the next 24 hours. So if you're getting spammed or harassed or anything, you can use this function. I haven't really heard of anyone needing to use it from any of our libraries, but the option is there for you. Also, if there is any sort of like continued spam or harassment, we can contact library help and have an IP address removed indefinitely or banned indefinitely. Definitely never had to do that, but just to let you know that the option is there. So when a chat is complete, and a user leaves the page, you're going to get a notice. So we'll just close this window out here. The window should get grayed out, and you'll get this purple notification here sometimes. And so if that patron came back and started chatting again, this window would just open up, and this chat could continue as normal. Similarly, if I close this chat here, and then I hopped over back to the patron side and started a conversation, it would just reopen this window here. So nothing would be lost from the conversation. So those are the basics of library help. I'm just going to close these two chats here. And I think it's simple enough that you can get started with pretty much that information. But remember all of the great documentation that we have through library help and on the intranet page itself. And in library help, you can also keep track of your chat history for statistics purposes. You can also set up automatic canned messages. You know, you might have a prepared message about library hours or how to get a new library card. And so those would be prepared in canned messages. So there's definitely more features to explore here and more that you could do, but you could jump in pretty quickly here. And so we reached out to some of our libraries that are already using library help to get a bit of their feedback and some advice for getting started with the service. So I wanted to share some of that information with you. Is good practical information. So Holly and the team at Leduc gave me some really great feedback that I really appreciate. So their first point is when your chat is live, it's useful to have more than one staff monitoring it if possible, in case one staff member is busy with patrons, even if they're not, you know, watching the chat, even if there's just someone who can listen for that ding, it's not a bad idea to have a second person around. And I know a lot of libraries can't do this. Maybe you only have one person on staff or on the desk, but when it's an option, it doesn't hurt to have a second person around. You probably also want to set some kind of reminder that lets you know when your chat hours are over, even if it's just some kind of timer. We talked about the auto logout function for library help, so that would help you not leave your chat on while your library is closed, because you don't want to come back the next morning and find a bunch of chat messages. You should also think of the chat as a real conversation with someone in front of you. So you can feel free to let them know that if you're busy, you can always ask for their contact information and get back to them later. So you don't have to try and type out the really long reference response while you're busy with something else. And because of the way that chat interactions often work, patrons might show up and type in their question, and then if you don't get back to them in 30 seconds or so, they might close the window and check back in a little bit. So it's good to just hop in there real quick, say hello, and if you're busy, let them know that. And yeah. Also, canned messages can be really useful, but also double check that you have the right one selected before you're sending it, because you don't actually want to send or accidentally want to send your user your hours of operation when they're asking about getting a library card. It might just be a little confusing. So you might also be reassured to hear that from all the libraries that got back to us, everybody let me know that they found library help to be easy to use. Even for people who aren't really fond of technology, that was kind of the consensus. And most of the time, you're not going to be asked difficult, deep reference questions. Mostly people just want to know if you're open, how they can get a library card, if you have the new book in your collection. You'll occasionally get reference questions, but they're going to be less common. So I hope you've learned a bit more about library help. And as always, if you're interested or have any questions, please reach out at wsfl@yrl.ab.ca. And remember that we can set this up for you privately, so the public aren't messaging you, and you can play around with this and see if it's something that you'd actually be interested in using. And if so, we can make it live. And if not, we can take it off your site. So we're going to move on to Wufoo here, and I'm just going to have another drink of water. Okay, lots of browser tabs open today. So the next add-on that we're going to cover is Wufoo. So there's a good chance that you are already familiar with this service. During the initial COVID response in 2020, we set up a bunch of patron registration and renewal pages for a number of libraries, and we did that using Wufoo forms. And a lot of those forms are still active. You might have also received surveys from YRL that included forms in Wufoo, and you might already be using Wufoo to survey your members. So Wufoo has been around for a little bit. As a form service, I think that Wufoo has some really interesting options, and there's a lot that it can do. And I've seen it used in some pretty creative ways. So I want to show you how to get started creating Wufoo forms. Two different ways to use the forms on your website, and then just a few examples of what those forms look like in practice on your website. So the first thing that you're going to need is a Wufoo login. If you don't already have login credentials and you want to use Wufoo, just email me at wsfl@yrl.ab.ca, and we can get you set up with those credentials. You can also let me know if you've lost your login information, and we can get that figured out as well. So once you're logged in, you're going to see all of your forms in a list, and you're also going to see the option up here to create a new form. So we'll start by creating a new form. You can use a template if you want to make a standard form. They've got a bunch of different standardized templates, but I find that starting from scratch is pretty easy, and generally you want even a little bit of flexibility. So I find it the easiest to just start from scratch. So the first thing that you're going to do probably is to give your form a title. Anytime you click on an element in the form like this, the left side of the screen here is going to update with some option menus for that element. So when we click on the title here, we're going to have the option to fill out the title, and we're just going to call this, we'll just call this test form. And then we have this description section, and I'm just going to call this subtitle. Not the most creative names. So there's a lot of customization options here if you're interested. I'm not going to go through them all today, but if you are working with Wufoo and you want to do something specific or creative and you can't quite figure out how, give us a shout, and there's a good chance that there's a way to make the form do what you want it to do. I'm constantly impressed by the functionality we can get out of Wufoo. And while we're in here in the form settings, I just wanted to look at a few things down here. So for example, we have turn form off after blank amount of entries. And so like an example of how you would use this is maybe you are setting up a registration for an event and you're only taking 20 registrants. You could just call that 20, and then after you have 20 responses, the survey will not accept any more responses. So that's one way you could use that. There's also allow only one entry per IP, and this you can use to prevent, excuse me, you can prevent sort of like ballot stuffing if you're taking votes on something. And kind of prevent spam from one person to just enter a whole bunch of replies. But I think it's worth mentioning to keep in mind that maybe if you have again, an event registration and you have two people from the same household that want to register for the event, the second person is going to be blocked if you have this on. So a useful tool, but something to keep in mind. And again, this is just a few options of functions. So the next thing we're going to want to do is add some fields. And this is where people are going to enter the information into the form. So there's a lot of options here for different fields that you can throw in your form. We have this standard section here. And you probably recognize some of these. I'm just going to add a bunch of them. Single line text, multiple choice, checkboxes, drop downs. I'm sure you're familiar with using these in different forms. And again, so the way you add any information to your fields is just to click on them and then edit them in the left side of the screen. And so for any of these, we can just click on them and edit any of the information, any of the text that we want to add here. And we could keep going on doing that. But also in the field section, Wufoo has what they call fancy pants fields. And these are more specific fields. I mean, these standard ones are pretty general and you can use them for a lot of things. The fancy pants ones are a bit more specific. As you can see here, they're kind of customized and they already have a number of things going on. And I think some of them are pretty interesting. Like this attach a file would be useful if you set up a form for maybe you had a job posting and you want to accept resumes on your website. You could set up this attach a file section, something like that. And so when you've gone through your form, you're done with your form, you're happy with all the questions you have, you just want to make sure you save your form. And you're probably going to be prompted to do that throughout the process. Sometimes it'll say, hey, you haven't saved in a while. And here there's a few options. You can share the form, you can continue editing, you can set up your email notifications, or you can go back to the list of forms. But we're just going to continue editing for the moment. And then we'll view form to see what it looks like. So here we can see what the form looks like, kind of get a sense of how it's set up. And when you're happy with that, we'll come back here and you can share the form. One thing I'll note while I'm here is the theme. So you can change the theme and you can set up your own custom theme. And what that means is, the theme is determining the color here. This icon at the top, you could put in your library's logo. You could change the font and some of the style. And when you change the theme, it's going to apply all of those settings to your form. So you can get a really customized look out of your form. But once you're done all that and you're happy with the form, you're just going to go to the share form button. And here we have the permalink. So if you're going to link to the form, if you're going to send this out in an email or use it on your website, you can copy this here. If we scroll down a bit, we are also going to get the embedding code. And we'll come back to this in a little bit later, but we are using the iframe code. So let's go back to the main forms page. And you can see now our test form is on the list. And from here, you can see all of the entries and information. There's no entries for this one, so I'm just going to go with this demo one here that I did. And so you can see the responses that came in. You can open it up and see a more detailed view of each response. If you highlight the responses here, you can choose to email them. You can also choose to download them if you want to have them in a spreadsheet or PDF. And if you have collected some personal information, then you want to delete that after the survey is complete, you can do that here as well. And for each form, you can also open up this more options setting menu from the dots on the far side here. And there's a lot of options going on in here. Probably the most important one, or the one that you're going to want to use each time you create a form, is this notification section. So we'll just go to that. And so what you can do with this is you can have it set to send any responses to an email address. You can put in multiple email addresses here if you just separate them with a comma. You can also have it set to send those responses to a mobile device. I'm not sure if I've seen anyone do that yet, but definitely people use the email address function. So that's how you get your form set up in a few of the settings that you would use for it. Once your form is totally complete and you want to share it, so one way that you would do that is, sending out an email, or putting it on Facebook, or sharing the link in a variety of ways. But you might also want to put it on your website. So let's open up Sitecore here. I'm just going to open up to my demo page that I've been working on. So the easiest way to add one of these forms to your website is just to kind of use a basic link function. And so to do that, it's like editing any page normally. You lock and edit. You go to the editor, show editor. I'm just going to make sure that I have that. Actually, I'm going to use this webinar demo one. I'm going to go to the share function, and I just want to make sure that I have the permalink here. So I'll copy that. And this is like any other link. You just highlight it, highlight the text that you want to turn into your link, select the Hyperlink Manager, and paste your URL in here. You can set your target window to new window, new browser, anything like that. And here we have a link. So that is definitely the easiest way to get that set up on your site. But the other way is to embed the code on your site. Embedding the code can also be quite easy, but there's a few things to keep in mind while you're doing it. So we'll go back to this share function in Wufoo, and we'll scroll down here, and we'll make sure we're selecting the iframe. WordPress code is for WordPress sites. JavaScript can be used in Java or other HTML applications, but our websites use iframe, so we'll just copy this text here. And yeah, these other codes won't show up on your website, so you just want to make sure that you're grabbing the iframe. And we'll head back to our text editor here. And in the text editor, you just want to flip over to the HTML tab here. And we'll start a new line, and we will paste that code. And we'll hop back over to the design tab, and we can see that this has showed up now. And this kind of gives us a preview of how it's going to look on the website, which is great. If you have a website with a ton of stuff on it, and you're a little bit concerned about jumping into the HTML code and figuring out where things are and where you're going to paste things, I showed a little trick in, I don't know if it was the last webinar or the one before, but I will show you again because I think it's pretty useful. Wherever you want your code to go, just throw in a bunch of symbols. And then when we hop back over to HTML, you'll see where those symbols are. And you can just jump down to the next line and paste your code, and you know exactly where it's going to show up on the page. So I'll just get rid of this. And so the one other thing that you want to keep in mind when you are embedding these surveys on your website is the length of the survey. So if you create a really long form with a lot of questions, the bottom of the form is probably going to get cut off. You can see here in our preview that it only goes this far. I'm going to accept that. And I'm gonna save, check in, and publish. And we'll take a look at the page on our site, and I'll give that a hard refresh. And so we can see here that the form is embedded, and it's a nice form and it looks good. But as we scroll down, we can see just what we saw in our preview, that the form ends right here. So there's a really easy way to fix this. You just need to know, just need to be aware that it happens sometimes and not forget about it. So we're going to go back into the editor, and we're going to go back into the HTML. And so this here is our iframe code. And we can see here iframe height. And this is set to 906 pixels, which means that our form is 906 pixels tall. And I've done a little bit of testing, so I already know, but you can do some trial and error here to figure this out. I think this one takes about 1500 pixels to show the whole thing. And so we don't need to just publish this right away. We can just hop back over to the design tab here and see if it's long enough, and it is. So you see we scroll down, and now we get to see the final question, and the submit button is here. So yeah, you can go into this height and do a little bit of trial and error and make sure it shows up the way that you want it to show up. And you don't need to publish things to see. You can just hop back and forth between the design and HTML tab. So let's accept that. We will save, check in, and publish. Back over to our site, and we'll give it a hard refresh. And now we see the final question shows up here, and we have our submit function. And yeah, once you have the size down, you have a very nice looking form embedded directly onto one of your web pages. So I'll show you a few examples of these forms kind of in action right now. So this is, right now, this is live on the YRL website. We have the YRL EResources Showdown. So if you want to come by our website and vote on this, we're pitting the e-resources that we have against each other to see which one is your favorite. And so we have this bracket set up here. And each week we're moving to a new section of the bracket, and you can come down here and you can vote on it. This is a Wufoo form that's been embedded in the page, and you can submit there to pick your selection. Another example is this one here on the Mayor Thorpe website. Excuse me. They have set up a YRCA voting selection. So they have these record sets embedded in the page that show the YRCA nominations for each category. And then down at the bottom, they have an embedded Wufoo form. And you can pick who you want to vote for, and you can vote here. You may actually see something about this upcoming in a newsletter. If you're interested in having a YRCA page set up like this, that's something that we can do for you with the nice record set and embedded form. So here's a great example of something that you can do with your Wufoo forms. Okay. So today we covered library help, how to get it set up on your website. We talked a bit about the patron and staff experiences, some of the basic functions for each of those, how you can find more information and documentation through the YRL intranet page, and also through the library help site. And also, if you're interested in the service, but you're not totally sure, reach out to us and we can set up a demo page for you to practice with, see if you're interested in. And then if you're not, we can get rid of it. And if you are, we can go live. And we also talked about Wufoo forms, how to get started with them, how to create a basic form, a few different ways you can share or display them. And yeah, some interesting ways to use them. So let's open up any questions. I see that there's a few comments in chat, and if you have any other questions, you can throw them in the chat now.
Actually, all just comments from me, Andrew.
Oh.
Sorry, it is basically just sharing information with our viewers today with some links. to how to reach you, how to get to the docs.libraryhelp.com, and to check out YRL Weekly next Wednesday for information about customizing web pages
Yeah.
with your assistance. So yes.
And sort of on that note, this is not the end of the technology services webinar series. You'll probably see in upcoming newsletters that we have the next 3 webinars planned in a row, and we're going to focus a bit on the TrackPack app, as well as the self-checkout and click and collect functions from the TrackPack app. And then we're also going to do a deeper dive into image editing, which we talked about in our last webinar. And we're going to look at LibraryAware and Canva and maybe a few other free software. So yeah, stay tuned to the YRL newsletter for that information.
Indeed, you are correct. It's pretty quiet. I don't have any questions in the chat, and we still have some folks here, but if there aren't any questions, then I suppose we can wrap it up. And I'm just going to remind everybody that there is a survey that's going to pop up as you exit today's webinar. And if you have a chance to fill it out, that would be super. And thanks so much for attending.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one.